On January 29, 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found unresponsive in the snow outside fellow officer Brian Albert's home in Canton, Massachusetts. His girlfriend Karen Reed was later charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of a fatal collision. Prosecutors allege that after a night of drinking, Reed dropped O'Keefe off at Albert's residence at 12:30 a.m., then struck him with her SUV while backing up, leaving him to die in the snow. They cite evidence including fragments of her broken taillight found near O'Keefe's body and a timeline containing digital evidence from John O'Keefe's phone and from Karen Reed's SUV. The defense counters that O'Keefe was beaten inside the house during a party and his body was staged outside to frame Karen Reed. They highlight investigative misconduct, including the use of inappropriate evidence collection methods and potential conflicts of interest due to close ties between investigators and the Albert family. The retrial has been moving more quickly than last year's trial, and tonight we are live from Dedham, Massachusetts with all the big moments. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. The case continues, a new week in the Karen Reed retrial of the century. And there was something that I heard from one of Karen Reed's attorneys, Bob Alessi, when I was up there in Dedham watching this case. And he said, seconds count in this case. And they absolutely do. Each second, as both sides try to establish through some of the digital evidence what happened and when it happened. And when you start thinking about distances and information on John O'Keefe's phone, information that was found in other places, it's important. Each second does count in this case. So today we heard from a witness who was talking about the text stream data on Karen Reed's SUV. This is like, it'd be like the black box, sort of, from an airplane, right? This is the information that is recorded by Toyota, by Lexus, and it kind of gives you a digital printout of some of the activities that the car was engaged in. And what this does is this creates a timeline. So there's certain things happening with Karen Reed's SUV, and there is a timestamp for all of it. Just like there was a timestamp for all the iPhone data on John O'Keefe's phone that we heard from one of the prosecution's experts. Now we're hearing from another expert talking about the timestamps and the timeline of this SUV. Now, the problem that prosecutors had, or may still have, depending upon your viewpoint of the evidence, is that the timeline from the SUV data doesn't line up with the timeline from John O'Keefe's phone. So we heard about a new concept in court today called clock drifting. This is where you take one timeline and it sort of drifts over to match up with another timeline. And that's what's happening in this case for prosecutors. This expert, taking a look at the data from the SUV, which wasn't matching up with the data from the cell phone, all of a sudden drifts the timeline over to make everything match up in a case where seconds count. So the question that we're left with tonight is, because you have to sort of manipulate some of the data and shift the timeline, can prosecutors prove that Karen Reed ran over John O'Keefe beyond a reasonable doubt? Because that is their burden and continues to be their burden. So is the jury okay? And will they follow what prosecutors are putting out there, which is, listen, our timeline makes perfect sense as long as you do a little bit of clock drifting to match them up. So that was a big part of today's testimony, but there was a lot that happened up in Dedham And there's someone who is on top of it all. Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson joining us live from outside the courthouse. I guess I left and it got chilly, right? The weather was beautiful when I was up there, Matt. And then I left and now it looks like it's cold again. A lot of important things today. It's expert testimony, but it's the type of testimony that I think prosecutors believe they need to lean into to win this case. And part of that is the DNA evidence.
DNA evidence was huge, and it's always sunny when you're in town, Vinnie. But right now, the prosecution is trying to shine some light on some key evidence, including from these DNA experts. And they're with the company by the name of Bodie. And we heard from them in trial number 1. And they did some testing on the male hair that was found on the back of Karen Reed's SUV, determined 95% with confidence likely that it came from victim John O'Keefe or one of the male family members of his that is related to his mom. Listen to this. All right, you're not wrong. You couldn't hear that, but that particular witness was just talking about the fact that it was 95% accurate that it was John O'Keefe's hair. And during that, there was a lot of reaction in court during the cross-examination of this particular witness, including from the O'Keefe family and Karen Reed during this questioning. The jury, in case you're wondering, very stoic during this particular witness and both of those DNA analyst witnesses because they were just reminded a couple days ago by this judge, Judge Beverly Cannoni, not to show any emotion in the courthouse, to leave that at the door. The analyst also, Nicholas Bradford, who you're looking at, testified about the taillight, likely the DNA on that to be Officer John O'Keefe, and negative for Trooper Proctor and Trooper Yuri Buchanan. So that was a big moment there, Vinnie.
Yes, because obviously Buchanan and Trooper Proctor are alleged to have planted some of this evidence, and prosecutors trying to establish through DNA that there's no evidence of them planting this evidence. A huge day with DNA, but I want to get back to what I was talking about off the top, the aperture witness, and this is the new expert, didn't testify last year. This is new stuff in the retrial. Tell us about the aperture witness.
Right. This is one of the 2 witnesses from the consulting firm now hired by the Commonwealth for their case in chief from Aperture Consulting. So this particular witness was really talking about that 3-point turn that we have heard so much about. Take a look at your screen. So that is the 3-point turn through the Waze app and through the cell phone data that was uncovered in Officer O'Keefe's cell phone. And then that was compared to the extraction report with the SUV. And then that whole clock drifting that you were explaining. The digital analyst with Aperture said that he adjusted the time to match those 2 by 20 to 30 seconds. Listen to this.
When you looked at the time from the Lexus clock regarding that backing event, did you do an analysis of John O'Keefe's phone considering the variance that you identified?
Yes, I did. So I applied the same variance to that second text stream event. The time of that event with the clock variance adjusted is 12:32:04 to between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12.
Now, cross-examination, that was fiery at times, and much of the afternoon spent on cross. But he was being asked about whether or not he reviewed testimony from this case from Ian Whiffen and trying to mirror that data that was already presented to this jury, and if he kept his particular timeline flexible, and if he was asked to do so by the Commonwealth. But a big chunk of the cross-examination was spent attacking his credibility and alleged lying on his resume. Listen to this.
it's a copy of my CV.
Is that a CV you prepared, sir?
It would have been prepared by myself or Aperture, yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end.
Sorry, it would have been prepared by myself or Aperture, yes.
It says Bachelor of General Science in Mathematics and Business Administration, University of Alabama-Birmingham, Alabama, 2022. Did I read that correct?
Yes, you did.
Are you aware that there's no degree at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, called a Bachelor of General Science in Mathematics and Business Administration?
Yes, I am, and that is one of the errors I've identified.
So you would agree that there's not even a degree called Bachelor of General Science in Mathematics and Business Administration offered at the University of Alabama, correct?
Correct. That should be Bachelor of General Studies with minor in Mathematics and Business Administration.
And what you just articulated, you do not possess as you sit here today, correct?
That is correct.
What you possess is an associate's degree, correct?
Correct.
And when did you obtain that associate's degree?
So that would have been 2015.
So, Vinnie, from his LinkedIn to his cover letters to what's on the website, what's been taken down, there was a lot of focus on his credentials, and this jury was paying close attention, and it was pretty interesting because they were writing a lot of notes during all of that.
Yeah, like the battle of the experts is based upon, you know, how you testify in court, but also like who you are and what you've done, what you've accomplished, and what your credentials are. Credentials are a big part of expert testimony, and he apparently had the wrong degree, like the wrong what they call the degree, but he didn't even get that degree.
He's still working on it. He said that he's been working on it for the past 17 years and that it was an oversight.
Okay. Hey, any reaction after court, Matt?
Okay, so you know we try to talk to Karen Reed or her defense team each and every day. Of course, all the attorneys, rather, they're under a gag order, so it's only Miss Reed that's able to speak occasionally. Last week, it was David Yannetti, though, who said that there would be no comment, and we kind of imagined that there wasn't going to be any comment moving forward until they're in their own case, because he said so, no comment, because the state's case is wrapping up and quickly. Well, after court today, Karen Reed had this to say. Reaction to today's testimony?
Yeah, my reaction is that Attorney Brennan represented to this court and to us just last week that he was surprised to get a report on May 8th that was only shared with us on May 11th. And now we find out from this witness that Attorney Brennan knew this report was coming the whole time. That's the definition of an ambush. That's what just happened. That's my only comment.
What do you think of his LinkedIn? What about the credentials? Anything on his credentials at all?
Yeah, it's called fraudulent. It's fraudulent. It's a lie.
Will you be able to challenge his conclusion?
Yes.
Things are really heating up this week. We're in the beginning of week 5. It's going to be a shorter week, but the Commonwealth could actually rest their case in chief as early as this Thursday, possibly after the holiday. And we're expecting them to call more witnesses, the neurologist, and then the other witness with Aperture that's going to be the brand new, never testified before for this trial, the crash reconstructionist. And so we are really laying down that groundwork of what's going to be the battle of the experts in this trial, Vinnie.
All right, Matt Johnson in Dedham, where it's getting dark and it's very chilly tonight. Thanks so much, Matt. All right, let's bring in our think tank. Joining us tonight, what credentials these folks have. Criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor. He was the MVP of the Mets last season. You may have seen him on the ball field. Al Wunsch III. Also with us, criminal defense attorney Darnell Crosslane, who came in second in the Masters this year. And family law attorney Jennifer Brandt. You may recognize her from Miss Universe. She actually won this year. The credentials are amazing on our think tank tonight. Al,
yes.
but apparently the expert for the prosecution puffed his degree a little bit, like by 2 years.
We're calling it stolen scholar.
Okay? I mean, you know, you see this thing with stolen valor. This is stolen scholar, where you put things on your resume that actually didn't happen. See, it's good. Darnell's resume, if you ever take a look at it, with regards to his situation, he just says, I went to school. Okay, so he leaves it perfectly broad. So this way here, you can never question or have him try to qualify that, okay? But in this case, to put something like that, what a mistake that is. How no one took a look at that, how no one took a look at that situation with regards to his employment is just baffling to me. I mean, there's a big difference between an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree when you are trying to qualify as an expert. It's an embarrassment. It's going to look bad to the state, the Commonwealth. It's going to look bad to them. It's a mess. Anytime you have his qualifications, and you know, I thought he was doing a good job. His explanation on clock drifting, you know, which is we're
going to get to that. We're going to get to all that explanation. But let's just focus now on who this guy is. Darnell, when you hire an expert, do you take them at their word, or do you dig into their background? I mean, if you're hiring an expert, do you trust their CV or their resume that they have?
Well, it's very interesting because anybody that you call to the stand, you automatically have to prepare yourself for the cross-examination. Whether it's a lay witness or expert witness, so you have to look at things that may hurt you. And when it comes to expert, just like if it was a lay witness that had a criminal record, we want to get that out. Well, when you have an expert, you have to say to yourself, if there's an issue such as he's 17 years trying to earn this degree,
well,
he has
on his resume, he had the degree, though. On his resume, he had it. So if you're hiring one, is it incumbent upon you, or in this case, the prosecution, to vet your own expert, or do you kind of take them at their word when you're hiring a firm?
Well, normally you take them at their word, but I think what we've seen over the years and we're seeing here now, you have to do a little bit of examination yourself, such as, so when did you graduate, or tell me a little bit about the school, because they're going to get into this. You know, you have to just kind of tweak that a little bit. Now, if they lie to you, just like Karen Reed did on the steps just now, I gave her a lot of credit for defining what's trial by ambush. If they lie to you, you're going to get ambushed on that cross-examination, and you're going to have to live with that. So I think that the prosecution was struck a blow today. The worst thing they could do is try to defend this situation now, because you can't defend your expert's credentials. That's gone. You could defend their testimony, such as did they get paid for their testimony, all of that. But you can't defend them lying on their CV. So that was a very, very strong blow to the prosecution.
It's insanity to me. I mean, this is something that could completely undermine his entire career. Jennifer Brandt, let me ask you, if he can not tell the truth about his qualifications and his education, can the jury trust him beyond a reasonable doubt for the conclusions that he comes to?
Absolutely not, Vinnie, and that's the issue here, that you can't trust this guy at all. If he can't even get his own resume straight and be truthful with regard to his credentials, then how can you believe anything that comes out of his mouth? I think the prosecution did themselves a huge disservice by having this witness on the stand and having this line of testimony whereby he just totally seemed to have lied or didn't check his own resume, didn't check his own credentials. I mean, it's just incredible to believe that somebody would get up there as a so-called expert and just not even be truthful with regard to his own credentials. So I don't think the jury could believe one word that comes out of his mouth, no matter how talented he is, no matter, you know, how good of a job he really did in his report. How can you even be sure, because he lied about where he went to school, what degree he got, and so on and so forth. So I just think it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that he was actually able to testify as an expert, but I don't think it was incumbent on the prosecution to check his credentials. Typically, we don't. Typically, we believe and take our experts at their word and don't go into whether or not they actually graduated from school or got a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. It's not something that I would think about necessarily checking, but after this, I will for sure.
Yeah, and the bottom line is, you could have that degree and then have real life experience and be an expert, but the question that you didn't tell the truth about it. That's the problem. It comes back to credibility. You know, same thing happened in the Michael Peterson, the staircase guy, is free because an expert was caught lying in one of his cases, so all of his cases became an absolute mess. Great news. Al, Darnell, Jennifer Brandt staying with us this hour. When we come back, we're going to talk about that clock drifting testimony of this expert, plus coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, the retrial of the century continues in Dedham, Massachusetts. And we take a closer look at the cause and manner of death with our own unbiased expert. What do John O'Keefe's injuries prove?
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
What happened that night? Are you not prepared to take responsibility for any of your crimes?
Interview with a Killer. Memorial Day Marathon. Starting next Monday, 11/10 Central, only on Court TV.
If we think back to the last slide, we've identified the three-point turn event in both the data sets. So now if we want to adjust one clock to the other, we can do that. And doing that, we've identified that the variance is between 21 and 29 seconds. So we would need to adjust the Lexus clock forward by 21 to 29 seconds to synchronize it with the iPhone data.
All right, that's a very important expert for the prosecution, right? Shannon Burgess. And what he's talking about is this three-point turn. This is the three-point turn that is done before the alleged impact of Karen Reed's SUV, like way before. As John and Karen are in the SUV driving to the Alberts' home, they pass the street that they're supposed to turn on, and then they do this three-point turn and then come back and make the right to go down Fairview. So he's using that three-point turn as sort of the way to sync up the clocks from the iPhone and the clock from the Lexus SUV. Take a listen to how much of a variance there is here.
When you looked at the time from the Lexus clock regarding that backing event, did you do an analysis of John O'Keefe's phone considering the variance that you identified?
Yes, I did. So I applied the same variance to that second take stream event. The time of that event with the clock variance adjusted is 12:32:04 to between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12.
Okay, let me lay this out for you graphically so you understand it. What you're looking at is the two different sets of times. The ones in white are from the phone. The ones in yellow are from the text stream data. That is from the Lexus, from Karen Reed's SUV. So if you go in chronological order, initially this is what all the times are. 12:22:14 is the start of the health event where John O'Keefe is allegedly climbing flights of stairs. Whiffen said he's actually driving up the street on his way to Brian Albert's home. Then you've got at 12:23:38. That's when the car says the three-point turn happens. But then you move ahead, and it's 12:23:59 to 12:24:07, according to the phone. That's when the three-point turn happens. Then after that, you have the end of the health event, the three flights that are climbed after the three-point turn. Then at 12:31:43, according to the Lexus, that's when the car is backing up. That's when John O'Keefe is struck. But according to the phone data, at 12:31:56, is the start of John O'Keefe's phone moving 36 steps. So he's like walking somewhere. Then the phone is unlocked with his face at 12:32:04. 12:32:09, the phone locks for the last time. And then at 12:32:16, he stops walking, or the phone stops moving. So they don't line up. So now as we make the adjustment, I want you to keep your eyes on what is in yellow so you can see the way this expert uses clock drifting to line them up. Now everything is in sync. After you change the times, everything is now perfectly in sync. The 3-point turn is the same at the Lexus data as it is in the phone, and the end of the backup maneuvering is back in sync with everything within the window of time. And it's all because they changed the time on the SUV. So let's bring back in our think tank to see what they have to say about all of this. Al Wunsch3rd, Darnell Crossland, and Jennifer Brandt. Al, is this normal? Is a jury going to say, sure, if your data doesn't line up, you can just shift it?
Well, first of all, clock drifting is not as bizarre as it may seem. People are hearing this for the first time, but how many of us have watched these TV shows or movies or synchronize your watches? Okay, that's because this is all a byproduct of actually Einstein's theory of relativity. Relativity gives us a gravitational time dilation. Okay, and as a result of that, all clocks are subject to this type of drift. And two clocks, if you put them next to each other, will not look like they're doing it at the same time, even if you're looking at them together based on a number of things, temperature, environment. There's so many different things going on with regards to that the time drift thing it's a scientifically accepted theory, and it happens. And like I said before, what I would be saying if I'm the prosecution, hey folks, you remember, synchronize your watches. That's why we do that.
Yeah, Darnell, but what I recall about synchronizing our watches was in the pre-digital age. Like, the technology exists where, like, my car changes time by itself. It sets the clock by itself. It leaps forward, it goes backwards, it's not like I gotta spin it like back in the old days. Do you think the jury will accept this clock drifting?
No, I think we're on a level playing field now. So even my Ford Escape syncs just like your Rolls Royce because it's satellite. So the satellites kind of feed these devices. Your iPhone, my iPhone right now are on the same time length. And so what you don't want to do is create a trial within a trial. And so I think if we have to assume that they have to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, as we see in the Diddy case, if there's a reasonable explanation that goes to the left and a reasonable that goes to the right, the defense wins. Because if there's ever a tie, the defense wins. So if you have to now start explaining Al's theory of Newton's law or whatever he just said, then we're just going to go with the defense because no one wants to hear that stuff. So that's reasonable doubt right there, Professor Wunsch.
Jennifer.
Well, I don't believe the clock drifting because I don't know that this guy can even get his resume straight. So again, we're talking about someone who couldn't even get his credentials right, and now he's talking about clocks not lining up. I agree with Darnell. We all have clocks that are synced. This is not a human error. We're not setting clocks anymore, so I don't know why there would be a discrepancy in digital clocks that are set by satellite, that are set to be all the same time. So
Al's chomping at the bit
I don't
here.
think that. Well, Al has his own theories, but he's
It's not my own
talking
theory.
about things
It's Einstein's theory. I hate to tell you. I know it's
Einstein's theory, but Einstein did not have a digital clock at the time. He was winding up the clocks and setting them himself. So I don't think we can use
take a look at your
Einstein's
phone
theory
right
here.
now. Take your phone and put it up against your watch, and the two times will be different. Okay, they'll be off by a couple
Maybe
of seconds
yours,
at
Al.
least.
Maybe yours.
No, that's just the way. That's the way you and atomic clocks. Everything down the line. It's just the way it's designed. This whole subject is accepted science. It's not some sort of voodoo thing. It actually comes into play. Now, whether it's that much time, that's another question. Okay, that's another question. If it could be that much. I mean, you're talking about, if you're talking about a couple of seconds, that might be a little more plausible. But nonetheless, this is an accepted standard. It's an accepted theory, and we've just never heard of it because they're using clock drifting. But if you go synchronization, I think people would understand that better.
Okay.
Hey, Vinnie, these two clocks are the same.
I think we need to check Al's resume.
The iPhone and the desk clock are both the same. They're both saying 8:33. So Al's little stopwatch in his pocket needs to catch up to time.
Okay, we'll synchronize our clocks during the commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about DNA on the taillight.
Now, sir, in your comparison analysis between the taillight sample and the known standard from John O'Keefe, what conclusions did you make from your analysis or comparative analysis between those two?
Between John O'Keefe and the mixture profile, John O'Keefe could not be excluded as a potential contributor to that mixture profile.
And as far as the statistical analysis, what, if anything, did you find with reference to that?
Yes, so we did, like I mentioned, that likelihood ratio, and in the case of it being a mixture of John O'Keefe and two unknown unrelated individuals, it would be 740 nonillion times more likely that it was a mixture of John O'Keefe and two unrelated individuals versus three unknown unrelated individuals.
Big evidence for prosecutors. You're putting John O'Keefe's DNA on the taillight, okay? And the numbers there, 749, did he say million? Like a number I never heard of before? A lot of zeros after that number. So they're pretty positive that John O'Keefe's DNA is on there. That's huge. Now, another part of the DNA in this case that is significant for prosecutors and the defense is other people, particularly Trooper Michael Proctor and Yuri Buchanan from the Massachusetts State Police, and whether or not their DNA is on the taillight region or any of the pieces. Take a listen.
Now, in your comparison analysis between the taillight sample and the known standard from Yuri Buchanan, what conclusions did you make from your analysis of those?
So he could not be visually excluded based on just comparing the profile to the StarMix output. So we do the likelihood ratio to determine that, like I said, that likelihood ratio. So in this case, it was 46 million times more likely that it was three unknown unrelated individuals versus Yuri Buchanan and two unknown unrelated individuals. So that would be very strong support for exclusion.
With regard to that taillight sample, you were asked to compare known samples to that taillight sample, the known samples being State Trooper Yuri Buchanan and former Trooper Michael Proctor, those two known samples, correct?
Correct.
Were you asked to compare a known sample from a person by the name of Brian Higgins?
No.
Were you asked to compare a known sample from a person by the name of Brian Albert?
No.
Were you asked to compare a known sample from a person named Kevin Albert?
No.
Were you asked to compare a known sample from a person by the name of former Chief Kenneth Berkowitz?
No.
Prosecution or the defense cross-examination of the DNA witness here was very limited and very focused on the likelihood numbers being much lower for Proctor and Buchanan. You heard 46 million, 76,000, I believe, for Proctor were the numbers there. And then here focusing on whose DNA you didn't have to compare it to. Let's bring back in our think tank. Al Watch III, Darnell Crossland, Jennifer Brandt. Jennifer, what are your thoughts here? Is this a problem for prosecutors that they didn't have DNA samples from Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and former Chief Berkowitz?
I mean, I think it's a problem just because the defense is going to say, well, you know, you didn't test all these other people that were allegedly at the scene, so how do we know that their DNA wasn't there as well? Or maybe they put John O'Keefe's DNA or somehow transferred DNA to the taillight. I mean, there could be a lot of different theories if you're not testing sort of everybody that was in the vicinity of, you know, that party that night. So I think it's going to, you know, raise some doubt. That's what the defense is trying to do. But we still have the really powerful evidence that we know that John O'Keefe's DNA was on that taillight. And I think that's a problem for the defense because, you know, how did it get there and why is it there? And I think it goes along with the prosecution's theory that, you know, Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with the car and the taillight, you know, he therefore got his DNA on the taillight. So, I mean, I think that's that is a bit problematic for the defense.
Yeah, and Al, you look at what the evidence is, not the things that are missing, but what actually exists is this exclusion of Proctor and Buchanan and the inclusion of John O'Keefe. And all of that is consistent with the prosecution case. The defense doesn't have evidence of someone else being there. They just have evidence of some other people not having their DNA compared to what was found.
Exactly. And I mean, this was a big, big hit for the prosecution on this case. You know, it's not going to be, their whole thing is about bringing in these other people, of course, because they want to, you know, kind of shed some light on other people that could possibly have been the suspect, that possibly have been the person that took out Officer O'Keefe. But in this instance, you're looking at a situation where O'Keefe's DNA is there. It's there. And the other two that they were complaining about as to screwing up the investigation, doing this, doing that, not there. That's a huge win. That's a huge win. Now that, you know, the math that goes on, you have this situation where you're looking at it, it's going to be very important in the closing for them to take that mathematical, you know, equations, because you hear these numbers, and like you said, how many zeros are on these numbers? I mean, it's just like, you know,
but the numbers aren't as high for excluding Proctor and Buchanan. The numbers are much lower.
Lower. But still they're numbers, and they're big numbers, okay? And you're going to need to try to synthesize that and to get that as an understanding in front of the jury. And I think that's going to be very powerful with regards to the evidence that they need to convict.
All right, Darnell, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take a close listen to this testimony from Proctor and Lieutenant Lang from Canton PD, both from the 2024 trial, but it's evidence that is out there and could be part of this trial, relative to Chief Berkowitz and whether or not he had access to the tail light and whether or not he ever found any pieces of the tail light. Again, he's one of the people whose DNA was not tested.
And also, toward the back of the vehicle, somebody just, while you were at the back of the vehicle, just sort of appeared and walked out of the sally port, correct?
Yes.
And was that Chief Berkowitz?
Yeah, it looks like him, yes.
Okay. So you and Chief Berkowitz are both toward the rear of the vehicle. He just apparates out of thin air because the video is missing some footage, correct?
It appears that way, or it skips.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Or it skips. I don't know that system at all, so.
Okay, and you're holding what appears to be that same black portfolio that we saw in the hospital.
Yes.
Lieutenant Gallagher directed me to go back to 34 Fairview Road and meet with Chief Berkowitz as he had possibly discovered more evidence.
And when you arrived at 34 Fairview Road on February 4th, what, if anything, did you observe and where did you observe?
Chief Berkowitz brought my attention to a piece of red glass that was about 6 to 8 feet off the into the yard.
So let me ask you, Darnell, does the defense do anything with this? Do they attempt to use this evidence and go after the former chief and say that he had opportunity and access? Or do they move on from this issue?
Well, I think the idea here is if the defense is raising that some people should have been tested that weren't tested, then it's going to shift the dynamics to the prosecution to say there was some reason why they didn't need to be tested. They weren't relevant or something like that. If they leave it out there and leave it hanging, the jury is going to have that to continue to raise doubt. We know when it comes to DNA, it's simple. It's you have a known and you test unknowns. So the known you can't change, all right? And so the known is going to be O'Keefe. That's the known. So you're going to be looking towards all the unknowns that are relevant. You can't test all the unknowns in the universe, but you're going to look at all the relevant unknowns. And now Berkowitz is handling this stuff, and the first trial raised some question of whether, in fact, they were doing some things that were unscrupulous. Then they're going to have a problem if they don't explain it. And so I think that's going to be the challenge, not to go too deeply into a space you don't need to, but you're going to have to explain this to the jury because they're going to be wondering, well, why you didn't test those guys?
All right, we're going to go around the horn. Just tell me, from your perspective, based on this DNA and the clock drifting, who had a better day? One word, prosecution or defense? Al.
Both.
Right? Of course. Darnell.
The defense, for sure.
And Jennifer.
The defense.
All right. Al Wunsch, Darnell Cross, and Jennifer Brandt, thank you all so much. We'll see you again really, really soon. When we come back, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight. Plus, coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, the retrial of the century continues in Dedham, Massachusetts. Karen Reed on trial for the murder of her boyfriend, John O'Keefe. What does the DNA evidence prove, and who does it help more? The prosecution or the defense?
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
How can anybody think I'm guilty? I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
Trial and error. Why did OJ win? Marathon begins Saturday morning, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
Her enamel.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board and see what's happening in the world of crime and justice. Trial day 6 for Diddy in the sex trafficking trial. Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft is in New York City and has the latest for us tonight.
Vinnie, threats to kill, forced labor, and money grabs. The second week of this Diddy sex trafficking trial today, a lot of fireworks were on display inside the courtroom. Inside the courtroom, Sean Combs appearing in good spirits, conferring with his counsel at times. Singer Dawn Richard on the stand this morning. Defense counsel trying to attack her credibility when questioning her about a civil lawsuit in which she asked for money, as her career, according to defense counsel, was on the decline. She testified that Combs threatened her with death if she told anyone about the beatings of Cassie. David James, a former personal assistant of Sean Combs, also on the stand. He testified that when he got hired, someone in Human Resources told him, "This is Mr. Combs' kingdom, and we are here to serve in it." Carrie Morgan, Ventura's former longtime best friend, also testified about the jealousy and violence she witnessed Combs display toward Cassie Ventura. Morgan also testified about a time Combs hit her with a wooden hanger. She was later given $30,000 from Ventura and signed a non-disclosure agreement to keep silent. Combs' defense attorney said the $30,000 was actually from Ventura, not Combs. Morgan maintained it was her understanding it was from Combs. And Vinnie, court does resume at 9 a.m. Eastern. David James will be back on the stand. And then we are expected to hear from another male escort who participated in those sexual freak-offs. That's the latest from here in New York. We'll send it back to you.
Okay, Kelly Craft in New York City. We'll continue to bring you all the latest in that case. And, I mean, really some disturbing testimony and facts coming out. I'm just waiting to hear more about the conspiracy and the other co-conspirators in this RICO case. Okay, right now I need you to take a look at your screens. We have a missing child who needs your help tonight. This is Solmi Veronica Kalbeck, missing since May 15th. She's only 14 years old, missing from Clarksville, Tennessee. Take a look at her picture. If you see her, pick up the phone, make a call, make a difference. You can call 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or the Clarksville Police in Tennessee. That phone number's up on your screen right now. Let's see if we can get Solmi to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We've got another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.